Hi, welcome to PeerPrism. This is an initiative by Peer Capital where we intend to bring in some of the operators, founders, and practitioners to go into the depths of building companies. This is part of the SaaS AI track of PeerPrism. I'm Karthik, and I'm joined by my colleague Vamsi. Welcome, everyone, here. And we are joined today by an esteemed guest. We have Vishwesh Pai, a dear friend of the firm and also someone who we have known for many years now. And I'll let Vishwesh talk about a little bit about his background. But Vishwesh today is building uh, an agentic AI company, and he's been in the product ecosystem for the last 15 plus years across US and India. Vishwesh, you started your career at Qualcomm, and you're kind of to some extent coming a full circle of building agents and making use of the capabilities that you possibly seeded back then today. But thank you so much for joining us for this piece. Maybe we'll start with a bit of a background and your journey, Vishwesh, over the years of how how's been your journey in the whole software ecosystem and the product ecosystem.
First of all, thanks Karthik and Vamshi for having me here. Peer Capital is doing fantastic work, and I've seen some of your investments. So good going in various spaces, including AI, gaming, deep tech, etc. Uh, to start with my background, specifically, I started as a full stack software engineer in Qualcomm on various software and protocols. Then moved towards programming in the cloud computing space on AWS, which is where I built a lot of these microservices as part of a startup long, long ago. And then moved to product management for the last 15 plus years. So in product management, have taken various roles, starting with the IoT cloud platform in Samsung and Ela Networks, and then focused on building voice uh, backend or cloud as part of Alexa's head of product initiative, where I led the multimodal cloud platform, which included voice modalities to start with, then video, as well as text and other modalities. And lastly, the last couple of roles in ServiceNow as a senior director of product, leading the Now Assist platform, which was a set of APIs, SDKs, tools to build these generative AI solutions first or skills, and then the agentic AI agents for the enterprise world, which is mainly in the ITSM, customer support management, system service management, HRSM, and various other areas. And continue doing that in Atlassian as a VP of product for Jira Service Management, and build some of the leading AI agents on top of Robo, like Robo Service, for enterprises to really, really take advantage of this generative AI and then the agentic AI wave. Beyond this, I've been actively investing in various startups in US as well as in India, um, directly as well as through other firms like Peer Capital and others. At this moment, I think I'm super excited about the deep tech initiatives in AI, as well as quantum, as well as the space tech and other areas. And where I see it's going is more of physical aspects of deep tech, including in the physical AI, or as I said before, space tech and other areas. So that's me. Right now based in Bangalore, but most of my life lived in Bay Area around 16 plus years, and now in Bangalore for the last 4 years, closely working with Peer Capital and other folks to evaluate companies and see what's the best place to invest. And very recently, less than 3 months ago, I started the journey to build an agentic AI first company to help enterprises uh, make that transition into uh, building, owning, and leveraging these AI agents for their use cases.
No, amazing, a stellar background, Vishwesh, having known you for the last few years now. Yeah, great to see how things have, yeah, progressed for you, and also the immense amount of learnings and insights that you bring through that journey. And it's actually very apt for today's topic, where we want to talk about software in this whole new agentic AI era. Um, so maybe let me start with the first question, and and maybe we'll go with that flow. Today, I'm sure ever since the Sasocalypse has happened, right? Software is priced at its abysmal low, and to a large extent, the cost of building software is almost assumed to be negligible, uh, and it's really about what you build beyond. Uh, Let me start with a first overarching question in terms of, hey, is this a overreaction? Uh, are we uh, in the middle or at the peak of hype? What's your quick sense? Because recently, I mean, this is changing dynamically, right? Today we are in the first week of June recording this. By the time we publish this, I don't know how things would have changed. So we hope to publish before things change. Uh, but curious to hear your thoughts on. What do you think about this whole thought on software costs going down abysmally? How do you see this?
Yeah, no, I think that's a I would say $1 billion question, because a lot of companies are just built and made on that. At a high level, is the Sasocalypse and all around it an overreaction? The answer is yes, to a very large extent. And I'm going to talk in probabilistic words here, because this space is evolving, and based on how much we have seen and what we have known, this seems like an overreaction. But let me take a step back and give both the perspectives, which is, why did the reaction even happen? And the reaction did happen because the power of AI is immense. Lot of things which used to take months and months to build, you can now build in weeks and even days. With these AI tools in the right hand, you can build in like weeks. So there is a lot of truth to what software used to take to build these applications and these systems 2 years ago or 5 years ago versus last 3 to 5 months. So the cost of building software has absolutely fallen. The percentage varies depending on the area, depending on the space, and who's using it or which team is using it. So that's a different question. But there is definitely a big improvement in the speed of what you can prototype, build, and deploy. At the same time, there is these projections on what this means for software engineers, for companies, especially SaaS companies and other non-SaaS companies. That seems like an overreaction, and the reason for that is straightforward. If you really take a systems approach, or take a step back, for any software to build, and very generic, I'm talking in very generic terms, you have to first plan and design, then you have to architect it, build it, test it, deploy it, scale, of course, build the security horizontal layer across the space, and then maintain it. Now, what this latest tools have enabled us to do is plan, design, and architect much faster. Does it mean it takes zero time? No. It does. Does it mean everything can be done by AI? No. There are humans involved for planning, designing, architecting, and pretty much all of this, but it's much faster. Let's pick a number. It takes 50% of the time than before. Okay. Again, these are all probabilistic and very vague numbers, but let's take it takes 50% of time. The next set of things which you have to do is build and test and all of that. Here is where AI has done the massive biggest impact today. and the numbers can go from 60% faster to 80% faster. Again, it has improved definitely at least double the speed or half the time. But we don't know where that number ends, because it depends on, is it a simple web app or a SaaS application or a tool or something system. So the percentage varies depending on where you're doing or who is doing it, and etc. etc. But yes, the impact is a massive on building, testing, and deploying. Now comes the last set of stages. It's not one stage, but set of stages where you uh, scale it. You build a lot of security systems in place, which are also done in planning, building, and testing. But a lot of things, configurations, deployment happens at the later stages, and maintaining. The impact of AI is the least there. When I say least, it is actually increased in some of these areas, like maintaining, because you have no way more code which is not generated by humans, which you have to maintain. So that is the space. Again, approximately that time was around 20% in the uh, world before agentic AI and all the AI tools came in. Now that 20% has become like two-thirds or even 80% of the work, because the remaining 80% has shrunken. So, and in some cases it has actually increased. The earlier 20% is now, from the earlier metric, is 25-30%. In the new metric is like almost 80% of the work. Again, a long answer, but this is super important, because the reaction and blogs and videos and all the hype is by shrinking this deployment and testing time, not the other sides, which, especially the scaling, security, maintenance, that is equal or more than before. And people are now realizing that there's a lot of value existing companies, be it my companies I work, like ServiceNow or Salesforce or Atlassian, they provide for enterprises to provide a very secure, scalable, and robust system, which takes a lot of time and effort. And that is still going to be there, at least for the next 2 years. That's how much I can see now. For the at least next 2 years, this is going to be a big value addition by companies. And hence my original thought that yes, it's an overreaction from the Sasocalypse world. And in fact, if you see today, in the last few weeks, the markets are realizing that the stocks are coming back, because there's a lot of value these companies do provide, and they will keep continue providing for at least next couple of years or more.
Understood. And that gives a great overview on how we should really be thinking about software today. And I'm curious to understand, just double clicking on the software development and deployment life cycle, right? You mentioned that parts of that have been taken over by AI. Could you give us a heuristic to say that if you were to look at a particular phase of the development, how much of that is taken over by AI today? And where is really human talent going into? You did mention that the last phase, where the maintenance and the scaling is still going to be a human problem. Would love to understand across these different phases, what part of it is really completely taken over by AI, and where there is still a human direction of resource.
Yeah. Uh, Great question, and I'll double click on this. At this moment, based on, and these are like 100,000 foot views, at this moment, I don't see a single area of the software cycle, or even in a given area, which is 100% takeover by AI. Maybe some of the things are, I'm just picking a number, 90-95% taken over. Let's say I say build a landing page. Okay, this AI can do, let's say, 95 or 98%. But still, there is a, if you give the same prompt, me as a product person or a architect versus a designer will almost always give a better prompt and come up with a better landing page or better page for your website. Why? And the reason for that is the way you prompt, the keywords you're using, the guardrails you're putting, or anything what you give will almost always be better from a person, he or she, who knows the design system very well, who knows what interactions are needed on your landing page. So at a high level, from my vantage point, I don't think any step in this process or any area or any domain is 100% today, which can be done 100% by AI. There will be some human required, most probably an experienced human who he or she has been in the space for 5, 10, 15 years, because AI can do a lot of this. Uh, Earlier, you had to remember what syntax for the code, what systems have to use. All that can be quickly taken care by AI, and that is definitely true. That doesn't mean you don't need junior folks. You need a lot of junior folks for various tasks. But uh, uh, for you to get 90-95% of the value in these areas where AI is really good, a senior human can do a way better job. So that's part one. The part two is the programming aspect. I think what has happened is AI has made it so much easier to build software that yes, you need less amount of time, but then what companies and various enterprises are doing is they're thinking about 2x or 5x more ideas which they can build. So the folks who can do, let's say, uh, 8 hours of work or 10 hours of work every day, uh, can do that in like 3 or 4 hours, but they are now doing more prototypes, more idea explorations, more applications. So at this moment, yes, of course, there's some companies who are using it to, again, for various aspects, lowering the headcount. One of them is definitely AI efficiency, but I think more companies are actually trying out more ideas, more prototypes, more business solutions, because you can build and deploy solutions much faster. Now, will this go on forever? Mostly not, but at least at this moment, there are a lot of other ideas which are being explored today. Now, the last part is most of the human, I would say, uh, creativity or talent, and most importantly, the experience is used in the starting phase, which is architecting or designing and planning, and at the latter stages, which is security, scaling, compliance, maintenance. And in fact, again, some reports do say that the maintenance effort has gone up because of AI, because you have so much of code being generated and which was not generated by humans in the first place. So you have to look to it. And yes, you can still use LLMs and AI to fix it, but it still requires more effort than before to actually maintain it. So bottom line is, think of it like a barbell. At the start, it's almost similar or little lower. At the end, it's similar or more. And in the middle, it has shrunk drastically because of the AI technologies.
Got it. Understood.
Interesting. Um, you kind of touched upon one piece, which is, yeah, obviously AI is increased efficiency and productivity. That leads to two things, right? One is, obviously, you will look to shrink the number of people, but the other positive side of it is you have more time on hands for the people for idea exploration. Now, in this world, one of the key other aspects is also that as you start building some of these new prototypes per se, and if something has to convert into a company, a platform in the long run, today building has become so easy that the wedge is so hard.
Yeah.
So as one thinks about building in this new world, uh, how should one think of what are the initial wedges? You did talk about one piece of it, which is orchestration, where as long as you're able to kind of orchestrate the whole thing, that is still a unique edge, at least for the next 1 or 2 years. But beyond orchestration, Vishwesh, if you had to kind of articulate what are those initial wedges one should look for?
Yeah, I think this is a long answer, probably a podcast in its own. But I'll give two frameworks which I use. One is uh, the stack for AI, and the second is what is the unique combination for most of the entrepreneurs to have an edge. So I'll just break it into two parts. The stack is, I think many of them have written it, and most of them are very familiar. So you have the infrastructure. I'm talking about physical infrastructure like data centers, energy needs, and all that. On top of it, you have the chips, I would say, or the infrastructure, which like semiconductor chips or AI chips. Quickly on top of it, you have LLM models. Again, people might add a layer here or not, but let's say you have models, then you have tools, and then you have applications. So 5 or 6 layers depending on who you talk to, but these are the rough layers what you have for the software stack. If you can, and if you have something in the bottom 3 layers, amazing. I mean, the capex is heavy, the moats are deeper and wider. So those three are very clear, which is data centers or energy side, the chips and models. So no brainer. If you have something there where you can raise the money, or if you have already a company there, deeper moats, wider moats, much tougher to and the wedge is super strong. So I'll leave that aside and talk about the top two again, which is the tools and the applications itself. Here is where I think the second part of my answer comes in, the framework, where you have a combination of the vertical, which you pick in, or the domain, some folks call it domain or verticals, the market you're targeting within. You can take a vertical and pick a domain or slash market, and the geo. So combination of all three can give you a wedge for what you're trying to build. For example, you can pick a vertical, let's say, you can say healthcare. Then you can say, okay, what market I'm going in healthcare? I want to take a part of this market, let's say in billing or coding or whatever that part is. And let's say I want to pick US market or EMEA market, whatever that market is. Again, they're a little bit flexible, the vertical domain market. So you can pick and choose where you want to uh, have your narrowest wedge, where you can enter the market with a strong tool or a AI application. And a combination of these, typically folks just think about one of these vectors, but I think a combination of all these three and where you sit in this whole AI stack is super important for you to build a wedge in a given vertical market and geo.
Interesting. That's right. And just extrapolating from when a company starts building out its wedge to as it scales, all companies really sort of think about what are their moats, right? It's probably an archetype or a term of the past that there are moats are information based or network based or relationship based. I'm curious to understand in this environment where almost software is becoming infrastructure, people are not even opening maybe tools in certain cases, but just directly querying the agent. In such a situation where the sands are shifting, where do you see moats getting formed? And what would the moats of the future possibly look like?
Yeah, again, this is my best guess, but at this moment, the physical aspects are very strong modes. Like going back to the framework in the previous response, in the data centers, energy, supply chain, the chips, semiconductor chips, I think the moats are very deep, and you do have a structural moat here, at least for the next 2 to 5 years, depending on the domain. The other set of mode I would think is in the ownership of data and understanding of these processes. So that's a piece where a lot of these companies have a quite a deep structural mode, and there are many companies who are actually targeting these areas where you have, including what I'm thinking as part of the Agentic AI solution, where you can own these processes, where you have this expertise and build a data, I would say, a superiority for you and your product for the next 2 to 5 years. The third structural mode, and I think is uh, one of the most important modes, is the distribution mode. The folks, the founders, or the existing companies, depending on who the target audience is, for existing companies and for founders who have a good Rolodex, the distribution is the key mode here for you to start from scratch. If you have in the B2C world, you can distribute and go fast through your channels, or in the B2B world, you know these companies, the CXOs, or the folks who will be your future champions and users. I think that's I would say one of the fantastic modes you can have, because the first one, physical one, you have a lot of capex you need to deploy these in data centers. But in the distribution world, if you have that as a company, or if you're as a founder, you have that, I think that's one of the, I would say, very good structural modes you can have for at least the next 2 to 5 years. And the last one, I think, is more like applies to everyone and anyone, is the speed at which you can move. Because in this world, you can do a lot of things very quickly. You can test out a tremendous amount of things in a given quarter. You can deploy much faster. You can iterate very quickly. I'm talking about mostly software and services and processes here. So I think if there is a team, so this boils down to team. If you have a team which can quickly build, deploy, the speed of innovation becomes your moat in this world. Because for you to be familiar with this technology, use it and build it, that itself becomes your moat, apart from the other three which we mentioned. So just to summarize, the structural moats, as I mean, these are in general are physical aspects like semiconductor chips or data centers. Second is ownership of data and processes which you can own, control, and dominate. And third is the distribution. And then the fourth, which is like I would say applies to anyone and everyone, any company, is the speed of innovation, where you can know all this and build and deploy. I quickly iterate.
Yeah. So let me. I'm curious on one other angle on this, Vishwesh, which is,
Yeah.
while let's leave the physical aspect aside for a minute and look at, assume that it's a software company who's looking to build, and despite having, say, speed, distribution, and the structural know-how or the context, today one of the biggest challenges is the foundational model creep.
Hmm.
uh, yeah, the foundational models are growing and evolving at a breakneck speed. So you know how do you see that in terms of uh, anything that we believe there is a good enough moat in terms of distribution and speed? There is a big risk or an overhang of the foundational models building up the capability purely from a context layer to be able to solve for it, and questioning the right to exist in certain cases. What's your thought on that? And how should one uh, think about that angle, or as one builds about the business and creates moats?
No, I think that's a fantastic question. No easy answer to that. But let me tell you, uh, 10 years ago, if you are building a startup, the typical question would have been, oh, what if Google does it, Microsoft does it, or Apple or Facebook builds that software? So it's not one to one, but very similar, I would say, today, where let's say you're building something, you're most probably building on Claude or Kimi, let's say if you're using open source, or Gemini or something else. And is there a risk tomorrow uh, OpenAI or Anthropic comes in this vertical and builds something which is close to what you're building? The answer is absolutely yes, and there is a good reason for them to do it. First, let's understand why they're even doing it. The reason they're doing it is very simply because they want to expand their TAM. Uh, they want to increase their total addressable market, which can help them raise more money, and which they can help them have more data. So from their perspective, it makes total sense. And also, if there are very big areas which do not have a specific capability, let's take legal, then there will be a complete blind spot for them, which from a data perspective, which is not good for these model companies. So the model companies are intrinsically as well as extrinsically from fundraising and market perspective, but also intrinsically from improving their models, they want to have more and more of these data sets. So they're going to do that, and they're going to do more of it, absolutely. And also to preempt other specific models which might come, let's say, just take a legal aspect. Let's say Harvey is dominating it. So it might be a blind spot. So they do not want that smaller reason than the other reasons which I said, but still they don't want any area which is completely a blind spot for them. Now, from a startup perspective, that's a risk. and that'll always be a risk, be it 10 years ago, now, or in the future. You will have some company which can always, big company which can always invest in your area and out invest you. But at the same time, that is also you can see that the areas which they are coming after are basically areas which are huge in terms of revenue potential. And I would say even before thinking about OpenAI, Anthropic, someone similar, you will have enough competition in that area because that TAM is so big. So you're not going to be the only company, or only 5 companies or 10 companies. You'll have hundreds of companies already competing in that space before these big companies come out. So the early sign might be, hey, if you have too much competition, then they're going to come. I mean, the bigger players are going to do the model creep in your area today or tomorrow. So that's a no-brainer. Okay, so that's from a what do you call fundamental aspect perspective, why they're doing it, and will they? I mean, and you can identify that much before because there'll be competition will be intense. What can you do to avoid it? I think you can't do much for them to enter or not. But what you can do is you can build these niches and have a little bit of diversification within the areas you tackle, be it verticals, be it use cases. And if you're in B2B, your relationships with the companies matter more and they can't replace you right away. But in the B2C, I think your customer relationship. So bottom line, own the end customer relationship, be it in B2C or B2B. That would give you some shock absorbers or some cushion when these companies come. But you have to, obviously, the speed of innovation, moving towards newer areas will be your key moat, and not actually holding on to the existing domain when there is this model creep.
I'll just take a pause, 1 minute.
So Vishwesh, I think this is something that I wanted to sort of pick your brains on in terms of just the sheer intuition of that you can derive from your journey, right? In if you were to look at the infrastructure stack today, or just the stack that sits above the physical infrastructure found and above the cloud providers, right? Like foundation model players are really a part of the stack that application providers will leverage, whether it's B2B or B2C. But today, I'm curious to know that we're even having this conversation about foundational model creep. Uh, and I'm curious to know, is the economics of AI set up in such a way that as models get larger, the pre-training and the post-training costs just get higher? And these folks in this stack are figuring out different ways to earn back the investment that they've made, or really exploit new areas of revenue pools, right, or profit pools, so to speak. So and you've been through a journey where you've been a part of large cloud service providers where they were really happy to sort of be the infra, pay us for the pay us for the access, but you go and service the end customer. But today, that's contrasted with the likes of Claude Cowork, etc. It's almost like simultaneously you're leveraging Claude or Anthropic to build a customer-facing application, and Anthropic themselves are launching products that service the end customer. How do you see this differentiating from the cloud wave? Are there certain similarities? Are there certain differences? Would love to sort of uh, uh, lean on your experience really to get a sense on how you see these two stories diverging and converging.
Maybe we can pause a little bit. The question is not clear. So if you can
Okay.
pause and uh, so the at a very high level, the way I'm understanding the question is, in the previous cloud world, the cloud providers provided the infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, and companies built SaaS products or applications on top of it. And there was a, I would say, good win-win for both of it, where they provided a platform and then the companies who built on top of it could get a decent percentage or capture a decent percentage of the revenue. And today, what you're saying is companies which are built on these LLM models, the LLM model companies themselves are also building some of these, and how do you even build on top of it? I think based on how much I remember, and I do remember some of these conversations 10, 15, or even 20 years back, there were similar concerns when cloud companies were actually doing it, where more and more applications, some of them were built by these cloud companies, and people are like, oh, what would we build on top of it? What would we provide on top of it? So I think the similar concerns are coming when you're building on a platform like OpenAI, LLMs, or GPTs, or on Anthropic or Gemini. But there is a clear distinction here. I'm not saying they're one to one. The clear distinction here is earlier they were like, for lack of better word, they were like non-intelligent platforms. But here these are LLMs themselves are intelligent. So there is an argument to say that they're not one to one. But at the same time, I think there's an argument to say it's very similar to the previous cloud wave as well, because we are in the very initial phases of it. And there are, you can bucket them into few domains, 10, 15, 20 domains, but each one of them is a vast universe of its own. If you take manufacturing, healthcare, telco, I mean, all these industries have a lot of depth, have a lot of variety. So the question really to ask is, can these LLM companies do everything? The early signs of it, I think, are no, because you can see OpenAI partnering with some of these like consulting companies, Anthropic doing the same, which gives you the sense that they understand that this is a vast, each one of these domains is a vast universe of it itself. The platform or the model companies would probably, at least right now, what we can see, will not be able to justice to even two, three of these, forget these tens of domains what we have. And the only way for them to tackle is to build these partnerships, to go deeper in each of these specific domains. Now, there are two caveats to my answer. So I think it's very similar. It's just that we are early on, and hence we are seeing this or having this fear that LLM companies are doing it. But there are two caveats to what I'm saying, which I don't have answers. One is, unlike the previous wave of cloud, this is the platform itself is intelligent. So I don't know how much it can learn on its own and probably do it. Maybe more than, so more of the value may be captured by these platforms than in the cloud wave. So that's what I'm getting to. Is it 100%? Most probably not, but it'll be way more value probably the platform we think can capture, because it's an intelligent layer, not like a relatively non-intelligent layer in the previous one. And that's why, again, and to why am I saying it? To back it up, the valuation of these companies are going in trillion or close to a trillion plus. So that validates that yes, these folks will capture way more value than the previous one. And the second part, caveat, is uh, the the cost of it. I think the cost of it is just a function of a lot of capex is going today, but there are a lot of indicators that this may not be true 2 to 5 years down the line, because uh, the the memory needs of the GPUs are being optimized in various angles by NVIDIA's of the world, and there are new companies also coming in. The the cost for compute, yes, it is becoming costly, but then we are comparing uh, the cost of a very big LLM model to a human labor. So if you take LLMs which are like 5 billion parameter or 7 or 10, they are still way cheaper than the human labor for a variety of tasks even today. Only when you really want to build, or when you're competing, or when you're taking the cost for the largest LLM on the most complex GPU, or the previous version of GPU, is becoming expensive. But I think the cost will keep going down. And there'll be applications where the cost will be higher, like for video applications and all, or gaming applications. But for text, voice, I think it'll be cheaper for 80, 90 percentile of the human intelligence work.
Understood. Got it.
Yeah. So just taking a segue from there, right? What this also means is we are at a interesting point in time where, historically, if we look at software, right, it was more about software platforms being available, tooling and infra, and then to some extent today we are at that stage for some of the foundational models, right, where the pricing is more from a seat-based pricing. Historically, that's what it was,
Yeah,
but increasingly the future is more about outcomes, and that's where the example that you gave of how some of these players like an OpenAI or Anthropic partnering with consulting firms, how do you make sure that you create outcomes rather than just provide the tool? Now this is a interesting contradiction of the two schools of uh, pricing, or where the world is moving towards, right? One is seat based, naturally looking at expanding, and that's where token maxing is also
yeah,
hitting there, and people are saying, okay, this is not the way. On the other end, you want to see real outcomes, and then your pricing based on that. So these are clearly at loggerheads. Clearly future is outcome based, but as the world moves more towards that, what are some of the key aspects to keep in mind as a builder of a new um, company? I wouldn't call it a tool or an outcome. I'm just calling it a company.
yeah. I think we don't have a clear-cut answer today, but yes, the trend is moving towards outcome-based because of LLMs and all these offerings. Uh, I have a slightly what do you call nuanced opinion here, which is I don't think the existing models will go away. It'll be existing models plus this new model, which will be what will work for new companies. What I mean by that is, let's say seat-based pricing or usage-based pricing. So it'll be a combination of three things. You'll have seat-based pricing, you'll have usage-based, which might be a add-on top of it, or which will go along with it, and you will have for some use cases in some industries the outcome based pricing, which will work very well. So my current belief, again, in June of 2026, is that all three will exist, but it will shift more and more towards outcome based pricing for some of the niche use cases to start with, and then it will become more of a trend. I think this is similar to most of the new technologies, but I'm also extending it to business models. So in this case, I think for HR kind of use cases, I think seat-based pricing would still hold true because you will have X number of employees, so you might want to charge based on that, and that won't go away completely. Or for that matter, I don't think it'll go away at all for some time. Second is usage based. That is absolutely here to stay, which was there from a long time. From the cloud computing days, it was there, but now it's coming for intelligence or the tasks to be done. So usually as a usage based model or token based, that will become more and more prominent for variety of use cases. And the last one is outcome based. It'll start with some niche use cases. Will it take over the other two business models? I don't think so. It would not, but it'll go along with the other two models for the foreseeable future, but it'll become more and more prominent for folks who are starting companies now, because that's where you can actually have a deeper partnership with enterprises. Or for that matter, you can also do for B2C areas, you can have outcome based pricing for a user where you say, hey, only if I accomplish this thing, then pay a percentage of it, or a rev share, or whatever that model they come up with, or KPI based.
Got it. And just dovetailing that theme and going to another sort of adjacent theme is about how are enterprise software companies really evaluating tools today, and you're building in the B2B space and possibly serving large enterprises. What are these conversations really looking like when you in customer conversations or potential leads that you engage with, right? And just one theme I wanted to sort of highlight, at least in the recent few months, there has always been this counter narrative that enterprises have struggled with implementing AI. They don't seem to feel that there's an immediate ROI. Why do you think this is the case?
Yeah. I think there are various angles to this why enterprises are not getting the complete ROI. I think the top thing is the technology is still very new. The latest power of AI or the agentic AI was first visible to most of us in December of 2025. So it's still less than 6 months. Okay. And what enterprises are doing is they are actually jumping on the bandwagon to try out new prototypes. And as I said before, they're trying out 5, 10, 15, 20 ideas at the same time. So the focus is not there. Where is this useful? Where can we do it? And for a good reason, because they don't know the potential of this technology and enterprises are trying it out. So that's the first step you do anyways. Now, out of these, let's say 10 projects, 8 might just go away and say, hey, this is not where we need to use AI. It's not even relevant. Let's use the earlier techniques. Those are good enough for us to do it. And there might be one or two projects or 10 to 20% of these where AI and specifically agentic AI, which we are talking about, would have a tremendous impact in terms of reducing costs or improving the efficiency or improving the top line. So either you reduce the cost or increase your top line. So those are not like applicable to all the prototypes or POCs the enterprises are doing. So all the statistics, all these numbers are now aggregated for all these experiments they have done, for lack of a better word. And yes, they're going to fail more than 50%, or even I would say 80% are going to fail, or 90%, right? But then the ones which remain are going to be the real use cases where they can reduce the cost by 50, 60, or even 80, 90% is what I've seen for some of the use cases. And you improve the top line by minimum of 25%, or in some cases 50 or even 100%. So once those use cases come to forefront, and which they are in many of the enterprises who are the leaders who started in Q4 of last year, now they're going to double down on these POCs to productize them, which many already have, and then take it to the next level. And new businesses will be built on top of it. And that's where it's a tremendous opportunity for startups to identify what are these use cases where companies are really finding this ROI using agentic AI. And when I say using agentic AI, it's not like in the other 80% or 8 out of 10 use cases, AI is not helping. AI may be helping, but it is cost prohibitive, or it may not be relevant to them, or it might be done just with a simple workflow rather than using something like LLM. So companies need to identify them, build for those 10 to 20% of the use cases where enterprises have really found the, I would say, LLM fit, like a product fit. You have to see where the LLMs are fit or AI is fit for your use case. And that's happening today. So earlier results absolutely align, and that's for a good reason, because enterprises tried out many things because of the power of agentic AI. But I think now those specific use cases are upcoming where there is a real ROI in terms of cost saving or improving the top.
And in that world, Vishwesh, if I had to just look at how do you measure the progress of a company, one is obviously there is ROI that's being delivered, but historically, one of the measure of that velocity of success has been the ARR metric to some extent, right? Now, obviously, with the complexity of pricing as things
Yeah.
evolve, you still have ARR, like you said, the seat based and usage based is going to remain. But to demonstrate ROI, yeah, how do you see the metrics evolving? If we had to, this is more crystal ball gazing, right? Things are evolving. But if we had to say ARR may not do true justice to show the potential of a company in today's agentic world, we may actually be undermining the ability of a company or the true value of a company. In some cases, we may actually be overestimating that because very quickly ROI is not seen, and therefore all the ARR may vanish. So, how do you see this tango playing?
Yeah, again, my naive view on this is ARR will remain, because all ARR stands for is annual recurring revenue. So going back to the previous model, which I said, seat based plus usage based plus outcome based. So a combination of all three will be the ARR, new ARR, rather than just being seat based. So ARR will stay, but within ARR, if you open the box, there might be 2 or 3 layers of revenue coming in for the ARR. And let's take the seat base. That's very well understood. I think it'll continue for many use cases, if not all. Usage based, I think today it's not yet proven that usage based does work, except for companies like Anthropic and OpenAI. For most of the software SaaS companies, it's still a small sliver of it. I would say less than 10% if I get my math right for most companies. So most of it is still seat based, some of it is usage based, and the new sliver is coming, which is outcome based. But if you really look at it, outcome based is actually on some tasks being performed by your tool or software for this other enterprise or for the customer, whoever the end customer is. Now, the other enterprise or a customer, that is also they are also growing on year on year. So there is a ARR or some kind of revenue for that company as well, which is was hopefully growing. And so percentage of that is your outcome based pricing. So for lack of better word, the ARR can still encapsulate all three, which is existing seat based, the new usage based, and the new outcome based into a new ARR for that particular enterprise contract or into a B2C customer, whatever you're looking at. It's less of B2C, but from a enterprise perspective, the ARR will still remain, but the percentage of these three or maybe a fourth way of doing business model, that will change. So it's there to stay. It's just that the composition will vary a little bit.
Got it. And Vishwesh, as we look to the future, prod you to crystal ball gaze a little more and give us some thoughts on how you see services interplaying with software tools or software service with pure play SaaS tools. In the past, they were almost this distinct two different worlds. Founders thought of it differently. The markets valued them very differently. But it almost feels like today with generative AIs, so to speak, a non-deterministic way of operating or how the technology is set up, it almost feels like the edge cases you need a human being in the loop. So how do you see this playing out in terms of business models, economics, etc.?
Yeah. Uh, let me help the audience why this is happening. And one of the ways to look at it is the cost of building these software has fallen drastically based on what we saw before. The development, deployment, testing that has reduced substantially. So what companies are thinking is why buy this software? Why not own the IP themselves? Why not own the product themselves? If not IP, at least the product where they can own it and build it. And for companies which are spending a lot of money on buying this software, that makes a lot of sense. If you're spending 10 million, 20 million a year, then you'll be like, hey, why don't I spend 5 million this year and then just build it out once and for all and then just spend on the maintenance going forward, which is actually so the number of companies who could do that has now increased because the cost and time, not just cost and time of building has come down substantially. Okay, so I don't have a number how many did before, but let's say a decent amount of companies did that before, which they went to the services company, IT services company, built them themselves. Now that percentage will increase drastically because of the cost and time to build has reduced, and by order of magnitude, at least 2 to 3, at least by I would say 50 to 80%, depending on the use case. So where am I going with this? What I'm trying to get to is, I think it is not that I think, again, my own view here, the software and services are merging. Is just that the amount of companies who will go with this services model will increase, and that model is going to be the same, which is there today, hourly based on humans or outcome based or product delivery outcome based, not the KPI outcome based, but the product delivery outcome based. So, but there'll be still a lot of companies who will not be able to invest and build a CRM themselves, or issue tracking system themselves, or whatever that HR system themselves. There'll be a lot of companies who may not be able to still invest and build it themselves and own the product and maintain it. Large companies, absolutely yes. So the amount of companies which will do services, IT services, will increase because of the cost is decreased, time is reduced. But I don't think it is going to be um, 80-90% more. Probably it'll be another 30-40% more today. But in the next 2 years, this can change. Let's say the cost of building even goes down by another 50% or 80%, 95%. Then more and more companies. So it's like a visualization. More and more companies fall in that bucket where they can now go and build the product and own it, and that becomes your services, the budget. So that which will become bigger and bigger because it's easier and easier to build this, and they would want to build it and own it and maintain it. So the reason I'm saying this mental model is because what you said is they both are merging. At this moment, I don't think they're merging. I think it's expanding. The IT services uh, blast radius is increased. They can now approach way more companies because of the dynamics of cost and time.
And that leads me to my last $1 million question in terms of what's the India advantage there. With the IT services capability expanding, your ability to solve for a lot more customers, a lot more use cases. Um, how do you see the India advantage?
I think there is a short term and then there is a medium and long term. So we'll talk about the short term first. Medium and long term, my guess is as good as anyone else's. So I'll first focus on short term. In the short term, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for India for various reasons. Number one, the AI literacy is quite high because of the initiatives by a lot of these companies as well as from the government, and also the macro pressure. People are really upskilling themselves very fast. So which means the AI literacy is relatively quite high, and very quickly it has become high. So that's good. The second is the number of, and we have touched upon this multiple times before in this podcast, the amount of ideas you can explore and deploy has gone up by order of magnitude. So you need people to actually build this out, either internally or through your GCCs or IT services. Either ways, India is going to benefit tremendously because of it. And lastly, in the short term, the third and most important thing, if you have built and actually even two out of these 10 ideas survive in your POCs, I'm saying percentage wise, 20 out of 100 percentage, 20% survive. That means the other end of the spectrum in my framework which I gave, which is scaling, maintaining security, compliance, all of that, that work is where at least the IT services companies traditionally hold a big edge, and that is not going away. In fact, that is increasing for all practical purposes. So bottom line is the GCC work, the IT services work, and the talent is all there for this explosion of ideas, software, POCs, which companies are exploring in the short term. And the short term is anywhere between 1 to 2 years. Is how much I think. I think it's a huge advantage for the Indian ecosystem. So that's the short term. In the medium to long term, we don't know how it will play out. Will the intelligence be even better in doing, let's say, the scaling part, the compliance, the maintaining, and all the other stuff? Uh, Sense is yes, it'll be better, but we don't know how much better to really take over all of this. Uh, but then I'm sure there'll be other new roles and new types of, I would say, areas which might develop, like data related jobs which might come up, which the Indian ecosystem will upskill them and might be good at, which we don't know. These are all future looking, 2 years, 5 years down the line. But in the short term, I think it's very good, the India advantage. In the medium to long term, we don't know. But the rate at which the deep tech companies are coming in India, out of India, be it in the model side, be it on the semi side, and definitely in the tools and application side, I think the future is uh, most probably very bright, because the trend line looks very good for India to be well positioned, even in this fundamental or infrastructure, the first three layers of bottom three layers, which we mentioned before. I think India is well positioned in the data centers, in the semi side, as well as the model side. And India is anyways good at the top two, which is tools and applications.
True, true. No, amazing. It's we're all long term optimistic and positive on India, and I'm
Yeah,
sure the some of the structural frameworks that you kind of talked about building in that direction. Lot to upskill and lot to make sure that you're on top of the game. I think that's really the key today. And
yeah,
uh, the framework that you mentioned for software companies to differentiate today is in terms of speed and distribution. I think that applies to individuals as well to some extent in
yeah,
terms of the pace of upskilling, and also how well you're also aware of all the stuff that's happening. uh, no, it's been an amazing conversation, Vishwesh. Really loved this conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of nuggets to pull out from this conversation with you. Thank you so much for
likewise.
joining us.
No, likewise, Karthik and Vamshi, and wonderful set of questions and responses. And from my personal perspective, that's exactly what I'm doing, which is helping enterprises, medium and large, to make that transition to the agentic AI first, where you can really optimize on some of these use cases, 10 to 20% of use cases, which will take you 2x or 3x better than what you're doing today. So that's my focus. That's exactly what I've been doing, and great conversation. Thank you for having me here, Karthik and Vamshi.
Now, wishing you all the best as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.